All the Hollywood versions of that life, how true are they?
If anyone's seen Wolf of Wall Street, other than the dwarfs, everything was pretty accurate. Yeah, there was a lot of drugs, a lot of drinking, there was a lot of partying, a lot of hedonism. It was pretty debauched time. These symptoms, which were signals for me to change, but I ignored them. So I was getting chronic insomnia, chronic anxiety, chronic panic attacks, and eventually culminated in a nervous breakdown. Here's the thing. The universe is very good at guiding us when we are misaligned, when we're off track, when we're not on our path.
For the listener who's listening going, where do I start?
I think there's two things. One is, where do I start as far as claiming back my life and finding health and happiness within inside myself? And then the other one is, where do I start as if I'm going to become a leader in the world? And just sitting in a chair with your eyes closed, you're going to focus on the breath moving in and out of your nostrils.
Thank you for doing that. It's the first time in this show we've done that.
Beautiful.
Tom, welcome to the podcast. Great to see you.
Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me along today.
You're welcome. Now, you are an expert in podcasting, that you've been on hundreds of them, and many of our listeners may well have heard you before, but I suspect many of them haven't. You've got a fascinating life from where you were in stockbroking to where you are today in a very different version of life. What will our audience get from our conversation?
Hopefully some clarity about a way to live life that's in harmony, a way to live life that is peaceful, and a way to live life that reduces turbulence. You know, there's a natural inclination for us to attract turbulence, drama, chaos, disorder in our lives because of the state that we are inside of ourselves. There's a congruency with our outer world to our inner world. So hopefully they'll walk away with some insights around how to get an inner world that is harmonious and peaceful so that the outer world starts to follow suit.
That sounds like Nirvana.
Well, you know, I think there was a guy that walked around 2,000 years ago that said the kingdom of heaven, something about is here or within or something. So there is that ability to find a deep peace and a deep bliss within us. There's a beautiful quote from Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, a wonderful wise sage in the Vedic tradition, that says no one needs to suffer because there's an ocean of bliss within everyone. It's just that we don't look inside for that bliss. We look outside of ourselves in our Netflix, in our Messina ice creams, in our Aperol spritzers, in our, you know, shopping malls. And so we need to start turning our attention inward because there's a treasure inside.
Before we go into all that, let me paint a picture.
I thought it's over. We've covered everything, right?
You covered everything, right? That's right. And we're going to come right back to that point, I think, several times, I suspect, over this conversation. Because I, as I said to you before we started, I have played with, and I've been on quite a few different meditation programs and retreats, and even the odd yoga retreat. And in the moment, I find it extraordinarily helpful, and I am hyper inconsistent. And I know that the times I play with meditation or any kind of meditative practices, it doesn't have to be sitting down with your eyes closed, I find it extraordinarily helpful. And I'm sure many folks listening to this today go, oh, that seems really, you know, it's not helpful for me. I'd encourage you to listen because it can be really helpful. What I'm hoping to get from the conversation is how do I get more consistent, because I know that might help me. But before we go into all of that, the first half of your life is equally interesting. And let me just paint a picture for the listeners. You wrote a book called The Portal, and I've heard many of your interviews, and you describe yourself sitting outside your stockbroking office, having panic attacks in the car, and then going into work and doing your job. You're not the first man to do that. I just don't think you'd be the last man to do that. What was happening for you in the car park, and what was happening to you, the person, before you went on the journey that you're now on?
Yeah. I guess we'll wind back to why I was getting the panic attacks, and then we'll go into what was happening in that car, and also in the cubicle, in the toilet at work, and in the restaurant while I was at a client lunch. You know, my nervous system had gotten to a point that was so dysregulated and so imbalanced and frayed, I think is the word, because of the lifestyle and the way I was living. So the day job was just yelling and screaming. If anyone's seen Wolf of Wall Street, it was pandemonium on a daily basis. This was late 80s, early 90s.
And you're on the floor?
I was on the trading floor, that's right. So it was a massive trading room floor, lots of different desks. So you said stockbroker, we were actually money brokers. So we were trading money products, that's bank bills, swaps, bonds, cash, foreign currencies. So we had this massive trading room floor of all these different brokers trading all these different products for investment banks all around the world. And each desk had hundreds of different banks yelling and screaming orders through what we'll call squawk boxes. A squawk box is where the trader somewhere in a bank around the world would be buying or selling 5 mil, 10 mil, 50 mil, 100 mil, $200 million tickets of one of those currency or cash products. And so the room was just this cacophony of noise, because not only would the trader be yelling through the squawk box, buy me 10 mil of the 10-year bond at such and such. Then I had to tell all of my colleagues on my desk, who all had their own clients yelling prices and selling and buying, then I would have to tell everyone I'm buying 10 mil of the government bond at $4.95. And then they would have to go and then tell all of their clients that the 10-year bond has just been purchased at $4.95. And so this constant back and forth is happening all around the room. So in the daytime, your nervous system is just constantly on edge. You're constantly filled with adrenaline, cortisol all day long. Okay. It never stops. And then...
And you're judged by how fast you move.
You have to move very fast, and the slightest slip up, you get it wrong, you say the wrong thing, you miss a call, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars in losses. So you have to be really so on point. Surprisingly, I was actually meant to be a journalist at Macquarie University, studying journalism at Macquarie Uni, Bachelor of Comms, but I had to fill in some time after backpacking around the world, taking a gap year from school. And I'd blown all my money traveling around Europe. You don't really want to know the story around that. And then
it's a different podcast.
Different podcast, yeah. And then when I got to the back to Sydney, I needed to fill in some time, and so I just applied to a bunch of jobs. And then, but lo and behold, I'm on the trading room floor. Okay. And so it wasn't something I was expecting, but it was really surprising. I was good at it. I was very fast, very quick at picking up the markets, and so. By daytime, we were doing that, and then nighttime was pulling out the corporate Amex card that the company gave us. They gave us a corporate Amex card and said, you need to win clients' business. So we'd be out till 2, 3, 4, 5 in the morning, whining and dining these traders and trying to win their business, so that if we spent, a huge amount of money on them that night, then the next day they're going to be most inclined to do their deals with us.
So all the Hollywood versions of that life, how true are they?
If anyone's seen Wolf of Wall Street, other than the dwarfs, everything was pretty accurate. Right. And it was, it was, I won't share too many of the stories because it was pretty out of control. Yeah. And there was some really wild things that were going on the trading room floor and outside of the trading room floor. But, there was a lot of drugs, a lot of drinking. It was a lot of partying, a lot of hedonism. It was pretty debauched time. Yeah. Yeah. But here's the thing. The universe is very good at guiding us when we are misaligned, when we're off track, when we're not on our path. And so what started to emerge coming back to the car was I started getting these symptoms, and symptoms are like a red light on the dashboard. And I started getting these symptoms, which were signals for me to change, but I ignored them. So those signals or symptoms get worse. And so I was getting chronic insomnia, chronic anxiety, chronic panic attacks, which I didn't know what they were. I just had these waves of fear and dread where I just had a dry mouth, sharp pain in my heart. I couldn't see. I had these cold, clammy sweats, and I'd have to just retreat somewhere to just get away from the current environment. So I'd go off to the cubicle or my car, or I'd be curled up in my bedroom in a ball and just wait for these waves to dissipate. But it was just crushing, and it was getting worse and worse as time went on, and it eventually culminated in a nervous breakdown.
There's a silence that surrounds high-performing men. And it's not unique to high-performing men, but I think men in general, where we get very focused on what we have to do. Our identity often wraps around what we're doing, and particularly if we're good at it. Yeah. And the fear of not being good at it gets us even more focused, and the potential, let's use the word shame. I'm not sure if it's always shame, but the potential embarrassment that comes with, hey, put my hand up, often prevents us doing so. It sounds like you are wrapped up in that space too. How does silence affect you?
Well, it was such a difficult environment to communicate what I was going through, even with my partner, because you don't want to be showing to people that you're not capable, that you're not strong, that you're not, the man that everyone thinks you are. And so, look, it would have been better if I was more communicative about this and I'd sought out help, but I just shut down and I just turned up every day, showing everyone what I'm good at. And that was a really big thing for me, was showing face and being presented as someone that was that strong alpha male and able to be really holding my space. And of course that came with a massive price over time. Yeah, massive price.
Which is the breakdown.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the other side of that, you had to almost dismantle the identity in order to rebuild a new one. And that's the whole classic going into, the hero's journey. You got to go into the dark, come out the other side. This whole podcast is designed to help listeners and myself appreciate that the second half of life can be the best second life, but you have to purposefully engineer it.
Yeah.
How did you let go the version of yourself in order to make space for whatever emerged afterwards?
Yeah, it was really difficult because the personality profile that I'd created was this crazy, wild, gun of a broker.
Yeah.
To then shifting into, hey everyone, just to let you all know I'm a meditation teacher now. It's like, there was like, no, I remember doing coke with you. Like, what are you talking about? So that doesn't.
That's right. Yeah.
So the people
you were relaxed afterwards, but it wasn't for meditation reasons.
So it took a while to really just really step into that new identity and that new character. And there's a lot of still, for me in the early days of that transition, a lot of unworthiness, a lot of imposter syndrome. I really struggled to own that. And even still to this day, some days I still like, are you really qualified? Are you really capable? Like there's still little gnawing doubts sometimes will seep in. So it was a big transition. But, one thing that really helped me was diving deep into Anthony Robbins' 6 human needs and looking at the 6 human needs that each one person needs to have in equal portion to live a fulfilling life of mastery. And if you want me to just share very briefly, we need to have certainty, which means, our relationships, our money, our house that we're living in is a really important foundation for one of the 6 human needs. We need to have some uncertainty, which makes life interesting and colorful. Too much certainty makes life very boring. If you just live in a monastery every day, it's just going to eventually be not enough uncertainty in that situation. We need to have connection, like love/connection. So that's relationships that are meaningful. And it can be a dog, it can be a goldfish, it can be another human, but we do definitely need community and connection. We need to have a sense of contribution. We talked before about B1G1 and charities, and for me that was a big part of how do I contribute. So I started doing charity work, and that's when I was working up at Wayside Chapel every Saturday morning as a broker. And I started to develop a sense of I need to contribute to the world in a way that's just not this hedonistic lifestyle of me trying to exploit and extract everything I can out of life, my own needs. We need to have some sense of significance, and that is, it's relevance/significance. So that's how am I significant in the world? And this is more than contribution. Contribution is just like, I just take some of my money and I give it to World Vision. Yeah. But significance is like, how am I meaningful, significant, and relevant to humanity? Yeah. And that was one that really landed for me. And so I started to look at what can I do to be more significant. And for me, the thing that I really wanted to bring to the world in significance was teaching meditation. And then that led to mentoring and speaking. And the final one is growth. We need to keep growing. And so anyone listening to this podcast, that box is getting ticked right now because they're learning things, they're growing, they're moving beyond the familiar into the unfamiliar. And we have to keep doing that as humans. It never stops. I thought I'd get to an end point where I'm done. It's like, I'm enlightened. I don't have to go any further. But I've realized that is an ongoing process of always growing and evolving. Yeah.
There's 2 that really jump out at me there that we have come back to in several different conversations in this podcast. The contribution and the significance part. Certainly you can't get to those parts if your life is completely uncertain. As you said, you have to have certainty, you have a degree of foundations, you have to have a degree of stability. Like you can't be wake up at 3 a.m. wondering, am I eating tomorrow or are my kids safe? So you have to take care of all of those first. A bit like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, isn't it? It takes care of those. But the contribution part, I have often recommended to people who are really wondering about, hey, I've been doing this for 25 years, like you were, very successfully. I'm bored by it, or I'm exhausted by it, or I'm overwhelmed by it. But the idea of leaving my banking job and opening up a cafe, that's a big leap, right? And I always recommend, don't do the big leap, but start small. And start small means volunteering. Volunteer somewhere and see where you enjoy that. In fact, my business partner, Stephen, when he went through a similar process, he started volunteering in a soup kitchen, making soup. Right? Extraordinarily impactful for him and impactful for the people who got the soup, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And it gave him a place to go every Saturday morning like you did.
Yeah, look, I see most likely for a lot of people listening to this, that type of audience, a lot of men, they get to sort of the ages of 40, 50, and we've been working hard, and it could be family, mortgages, career, And then we get to a particular point, particularly around 50, where it's like, what next? And the ones that take that path of significance and contribution, they have a really rich, meaningful life.
Yeah.
And testimony to you doing a podcast, because that's all about significance and contribution, 2 boxes ticked in one. And also probably growth, because you're probably growing while you're creating this, right? But the people that I see don't, and they're the ones that you see, unfortunately, sitting at the poker machine in the RSL all day long, just smoking cigarettes, drinking beer, and there's this sense of, man, you have such great masculine qualities that are like untapped and sitting there as pure potential, just lying dormantly and not being utilized.
Yeah, you're 100% right. 100% right. There's a guy called Marty Seligman who's famous in the positive psychology kind of world. It's a bit ironic because if you ever meet him, he's one of the most grumpiest people you'll ever meet. He's a genius in what he does. But he has a whole thing.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Correct. Correct. But he did change the world in terms of the impact he has had. But he talks about character strengths, and he says the strengths that you have in one part of your life, like a trading floor, they're the same strengths that can help you move to the second part of your life if you think about it and use them. And this is where I think a lot of us men get stuck. We think, hey, I'm really, really good at being X, and that's all I've ever done. That's all I ever do. And now I don't want to do it. Well, actually, X is made up of a lot of other things. So how do you take some of those? When you think about where you've come to, and the books you've written, and the documentary you've done, and the goal of 1 billion people, which we'll come to, I'm imagining some of the strengths you had in your early career have really helped you where you are now.
Yeah, for sure. As a broker, we had to have an insatiable appetite to win business, to secure deals, and to not only win business to secure deals, but the process to do that was to develop really strong relationships. You can't win deals and secure business if you're an arsehole and the people don't like you, they don't want to deal with you. So a big part of that was twofold, which was charming, palatable, not palatable, what's the right word? Amicable and friendly and warm and interesting and insightful. So that developing relationships really played a big part in what I'm doing in our world today. And obviously a big part of my business is also to, generate transformation through people's lives. But to do that, I need to have people come into my containers, coaching containers, retreats, meditation courses. So like you said, exactly that. A lot of my qualities as a good broker have overlaid quite nicely into my business now as a coach and a meditation teacher.
Did you think they would when you started?
You don't, because you think that you're focused on the work that you do, which is teaching meditation. And a big part of my work these days is working with other meditation teachers and yoga teachers and breath workers, coaches, helping them grow their businesses. Mm-hmm. And what I'm teaching them is what I had to learn myself, is that your skill set as a coach or yoga teacher or speaker is only one component of the success that you're going to have. Mm-hmm. The next component you're going to need is how to market yourself, how to develop connection, how to develop positioning yourself as an authority in this space. And that takes a lot of time, a lot of attention, and getting on podcasts and social media and blogs and all sorts of strategies to position them in a way that has a diverse and successful business.
Essentially, you and I met originally through a podcast network referral type platform. And just going back to your point about your history in business and stuff, you're the first person to actually reply, right? Wow. And here we are now, right?
Yeah,
and I think I've reached out to maybe 100.
Wow, what are they doing on there?
Don't know.
That's
don't know. But it just shows, the skills you had in terms of relationship building a business. And then you and I jumped on a few calls and got to know each other. But the starting point was you actually reached out and had a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
The skills that you're very, very good at.
Yeah. I say to all of my clients that I'm mentoring in my Zen Academy is that it could be a conversation in a lift. It could be, someone that you're helping carry their bags across the street. Everyone is potentially a client or a customer or a connection or someone that leads to something else. So I always say to them, just be amiable, be amicable, be charming, and to see where that goes and be open to the possibilities.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to contribution significance, and another word in that is like, how do you matter? And that's the word I just used, but it's the same idea. And if you're able to matter to your barista or to the guy carrying the bags, right, then you're going to matter to a lot of people just by that nature. Yeah.
I always come back to this: is that we think of things in the world of denseness, so that we don't realize, the way I see it anyway, is that the universe is watching me. And the way I respond in every single situation will determine what the universe feels I'm worthy of receiving. And that it's not just about what humans are seeing of me, it's about the way the universe is seeing me. Now, this might be a bit woo-woo for some people, but I really feel deeply that I have to start really thinking that it's not about what I'm doing when I'm being seen by people, it's what I'm doing all the time. What I'm thinking, what I'm saying, what I'm reading, what I'm doing. I believe the universe responds in accordance with that.
So let's just jump right there. So there'll be some listeners right now who are going, that is too far out from my mind. There'll be other people going, yeah, that's metaphysics in action. Other people going, that's energy flowing. And you know, there's a whole range of views there. How do you talk to the 45-year-old or 50-year-old man who has never engaged in meditation, who doesn't understand that, according to your book, you describe deep meditation as genuinely transformative, right? And I think my own experience has been it has helped me for sure. So the person who's never engaged, how do you start?
Firstly, you can lead a horse to water, but you've got to inspire it to drink. And so we can show them in a moment some meditation techniques that they can walk away with today. But more importantly is them understanding why it works and why it's so important. And it comes down to science, it comes down to biology, it comes down to biochemistry. So if we're in a sympathetic nervous system state, that's S for sympathetic, which means S for stress response, which means we're in fight-flight. And if we're in fight-flight, your body is changing quite significantly. Your biochemistry means you're producing adrenaline and cortisol, and you're going to reduce, if not completely shut down, the biochemicals of oxytocin, serotonin, and melatonin, the biochemicals for love, happiness, and sleep. So the reason why we have a lot of insomnia, a lot of unhappy people, and a lot of poor relationships is because people are simply producing adrenaline and cortisol because they're in fight-flight, the sympathetic nervous system. Okay. And that simply can come down to walking down a street and trying to respond to emails or text messages, because your body's then very unsafe. It's not watching what it's doing, it's not taking in all information, and there's a sense of trepidation, and it doesn't feel safe because of what you're doing, simply doing that, or checking your phone while you're driving. All these things, being on emails till midnight, or all the things that we're doing that are really putting us into the sympathetic nervous system. And so that means we're devoid of the biochemical for having healthy relationships, which is love, compassion, tenderness, and kindness. We're devoid of being able to be happy and jovial and laughing because we don't produce serotonin, and we're devoid of being able to sleep well because we're not producing melatonin. So when we go into meditative states, we switch very quickly into a peace response, which is the parasympathetic nervous system. And all of that imbalance just simply shifts very, very quickly. It's a body's designed to be able to fight when it needs to fight or flee, and to also recover, rest and repair. And so we have fight, flight, rest and repair. Now we want to be able to sustain consistently, not just in a 10, 15, 20 minute meditation, but we talked about before you being in a meditative state. Yeah. Meditation helps us get into a consistent meditative state, which means that I want to be in the most intense situations and still be in rest and repair, still be in the parasympathetic, because a few things happen when I'm operating from that space. And Oprah Winfrey does this meditation that I teach, Vedic meditation. And she says the consistency of stillness, word for word, it is only from that space can you create your best work and your best life. Because if you're in fight, flight and you're trying to have a relationship, if you're in fight, flight and you're trying to make a business decision, if you're in fight, flight and you're trying to be at a work function, you're not going to be your best. Yeah. Your brain is impaired, your body's impaired. There's so many things happening on a physiological, mental, and biochemical level that is detrimental to your well-being. And the problem with this is that we're staying in fight, flight for some people 24/7, which is what happened to me. And your body can only take that state for so long before it starts to break down.
Now, you've said a load of things there I want to double click on. So you're talking about various hormones: cortisol, melatonin, serotonin, adrenaline. So these are naturally occurring hormones. They're part of our body. Cortisol, a lot of people think misunderstand cortisol. Cortisol has a key role to play. First thing in the morning, it rises in order to help us wake up. Right? That's its purpose, just to get us out of bed.
Melatonin drops, cortisol rises. Yeah, that's right.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's designed to stay elevated throughout the day to keep it, but it's designed to start tapering off. If we're stimulating it ourselves, we're keeping it elevated. Is that correct?
Yeah, so unfortunately what's happening, we do actually wake with a little burst of cortisol, and that's so that traditionally our body, being Homo sapiens, was that we could wake up, chop wood, light the fire, go get some water, round up the cows, check the fort, protect the family. Yeah. There was a lot of things we had to physically do initially, and we needed that. We didn't want melatonin while we're trying to do that. Yeah. We needed the melatonin to drop at a certain time and then the cortisol to kick in. Yeah. Now, what's happening for us, unfortunately, most of us aren't doing physical exercise. So every morning when I wake up, the first thing I do is put on my joggers and I go for a run or a gym workout. So this morning at 5 a.m. I'm at the gym because I want to burn off that cortisol and use it to my potential and do the things that I would have done 5,000 years ago, but I'm doing today in a gym instead. Okay. But what a lot of people are doing is they're checking their emails, scrolling through their Instagram and having a double shot macchiato, double dipping on the cortisol by putting caffeine on top of that. And then they're sitting in a chair or on the train, in the office, and then they're just going into emails. We're not doing the physical things that we should be doing. And any men, I believe, from the age of 40 onwards, should be actually going into cardio and strength training at least 4 or 5 times a week.
And ideally first thing in the morning?
Ideally first thing in the morning, absolutely. Yeah. There's a great book called The 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma, and he talks a lot about that first morning routine. And so my morning routine has 7 steps in it, and it usually goes, ideally, most mornings from 5 till 8.
Okay, I want to come back to that. The parasympathetic nervous system, the idea as the mitigation against the sympathetic nervous system, all of us clearly have the system, but it doesn't always work for us in the sense that folks who have insomnia as an ongoing piece, sometimes it's the parasympathetic nervous system is just not quite working. Yeah. Do you do anything with the vagal nervous system in terms of the vagus nerve? Do you do anything around that in terms of stimulation to help that click in?
Look, it's a really good question. I believe that we need to take a very holistic approach to health and wellness and optimizing the human state. So really, it's not a matter of health and wellness. It's like, just realizing your true potential. Yeah. And meditation plays a part in many respects, but it's not enough. So for me, the core components to my overall optimization of my human experience. So I'm 58, but my biological age is around 40, 42. But there's a number of different steps and processes and protocols that I use for that. And so strength training is one of them. And there's a great book by Deepak Chopra, Live Longer, Grow Younger. And he talks a lot about strength training because we develop muscle, which means we need to then develop the bones to carry the muscle, which prevents osteoporosis. So strength training, cardio, stretching, meditation, and then obviously hydration, really good hydration. That doesn't mean 4 cups of coffee. And then a glass of wine, it means really good fluids. And then obviously eating well. And then beyond that, we've got our wonderful families, contribution, the 6 human needs.
Okay, so that's what you rely on.
Yeah. But within that, I also add for the vagus nerve ice baths, hot and cold therapy. So I do saunas and ice baths once or twice a week as well. Okay.
I've just recently invested in a sauna, and I'm doing it 3 nights a week.
Beautiful.
And I am shocked at how well I'm sleeping.
So good, right?
Yeah. 12 minutes, 15 minutes max.
So good.
85 degrees or something like that. It takes me an hour to plug it in, just let it heat up. It's extraordinary. Really, really helpful. We had Catherine Ball on here. She is a specialist in sleep, and she talked about some new technologies that literally clip on to your earlobe to help stimulate the vagus nerve for those people who seem to be continually stimulated beyond the parasympathetic nervous system's ability to kick in. And before these new technologies, there was a device that was implanted around your carotid to do that. But now they've discovered if you do it on the earlobe, it actually works equally well. So it's for a tiny number of the population, but the purpose is just to stimulate the vagus nerve, to calm you down, and then the parasympathetic nervous system just kicks in, and it's pretty quite effective.
I've had so many clients that have had chronic insomnia, which was the case for me as well. I mean, I just couldn't fall asleep, and then I'd always be waking up at 2 or 3 in the morning, like most people with insomnia. But what we found is that sleep has to carry a very heavy load if there's a lot of stress in the system, and that load is too heavy to bear for sleep, and so that's why sleep gets compromised. But what we found is that meditation, particularly something like Vedic meditation, a deeper meditation or TM, it releases a lot of that stress load. We call it the allostatic load, the load of wear and tear on the body and the nervous system. And in the meditations, the clearing of that allostatic load morning and afternoon that allows sleep to then do what it does. And the body is much more open to the sleep experience because it's already had a lot of reprieve before we get to sleep. So we're finding meditation to be one of the most effective tools for getting the sleep onset happening.
Okay. I want to bring you back to the moment of you being exposed to meditation, because you seem to have jumped very quickly from I left financial services to hey, I'm coming back as a meditation teacher. Right? Something happened in between. And I'm just thinking of the moment where, and I'm not sure it was a desperation or not, but whatever the moment was where you, okay, I'm going to try this. You got some immediate satisfaction. You go, okay, I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to go back to this. In that moment, a lot of us go back to coffee or alcohol or whatever it is. You chose something different in that moment. Talk to us about that. Sure. And what was it that you initially got that kind of, I want more of whatever that is?
Yeah, and just to give some context around the storyline and the sequencing is that when I learned to meditate, it was another 16 years before I left finance to actually then go and become a teacher. Okay. So exactly like you said, when I learned to meditate, the Vedic meditation, or TM as well, it might be known as, it was so palpable, it was so impacting and definitive as to the benefits I was getting from it, that it was completely superseded by caffeine, by drugs, by drinking. Those three things just dropped away very quickly, the late nights. Everything was replaced by this thing that was simply much more effective than anything else that I was using. Okay. And one thing I always come back to, is, which I teach, is that everything every human is doing right now, every single person on the planet is doing only one thing. We're all trying to find fulfillment from an action. And that's whether we're cleaning the bathroom floor, whether we're doing a line of coke, whether we're working on a podcast, whether we're going to a monastery in Tibet. Everyone believes that that action will bring them some degree of fulfillment. Even if we're cleaning the bathroom floor, we feel better when our floor is clean. Putting bottle tops on bottles in a factory, we feel better when we pay our rent. And so what I found through not only the knowledge of the Vedas and the Vedic tradition, but also through the technique itself, which was validated very quickly, was that it shifted from outcome-oriented fulfillment to self-referred fulfillment. And self-referred fulfillment is a state that is independent of any outcomes and circumstances. And I was living my entire life in outcome-oriented fulfillment, which drove the drugs, the drinking, the partying. But what we want to start to reclaim as humans is a self-referred state of fulfillment. It's a fulfillment that is scientifically verified through the increase of oxytocin and serotonin, which are the biochemicals of love and happiness. And I was addicted to MDMA or ecstasy because I wanted simply the MDMA to trigger more oxytocin and serotonin. Yeah. And here I found in meditation the same thing was happening by doing that twice a day.
With no cost.
With no cost.
And no hangover.
And no massive detrimental side effects, which was what was happening with the drugs.
What I'm interested in is you there was a period of 16 years. Mm-hmm. You were in an industry that expected and rewarded, in your words, hedonistic type behavior, and that's not the only industry, right? Mm-hmm. But that's the one you were in. But you still stayed while you were moving away from that behavior and getting the same outcome for yourself. What were people around you thinking?
Yeah, look, it was definitely a challenge, and this is something for everyone listening in. If you are going to make that healthy lifestyle transition, you may be the abnormal weird one, right? Yeah. And I was definitely the weird one because no one else was doing what I was doing. Yeah. So the big part of the culture was to wine and dine clients, and that always revolved predominantly drinking, but sometimes also drugs. And so I had to find a pathway that was going to sustain me in that industry because I still had mortgage and family to feed and a lot of financial commitments, and being a meditation teacher was not a big career move financially. So I had to still walk that path and find a way to navigate that. And if you're okay, I'll share a little anecdote that my meditation teacher shared with me when I asked him, how am I going to do this? And I think a lot of the men listening will get a lot of merit out of this, a lot of value out of it. He said, look, at the end of the day of war, back in World War I, World War II, the men, when the sun would set, they didn't have night goggles and night vision, so they would just put down their arms and then they would go back to the mess hall, and they walked into the mess hall covered in grime and blood and sweat, and then they would start whooping it up with shots of whiskey and bourbon and beers, and then the general would walk in to acknowledge and honor the men, and he'd walk in his beautiful outfit with his wonderful badges of honor, and there'd be a hush around the room because the general has walked into the room, like, hey, the general's here, and they were all deeply honored that the general would walk in and come and pay them all a visit. And he would sit down on one of the bar stools and say, "Hey fellas, great work today, fantastic." And they would like, "Hey General, do you want us to get me cranberry juice, or do you want me to get you a mineral water or something?" Because they knew he was not going to get wasted. This was the General, and he's got his wits together, and he holds space for everyone. And the General would drink a cranberry juice and chat with the guys and just check in with everyone. And then after about an hour or so, he'd say, "Okay fellas, well it's time for me to go. I'll let you have your night and have fun. We'll see you all back in the trenches." And the men would get completely wasted, dancing and vomiting and falling over. And then my teacher just looked me right into the eye. And he said, "You're just going to have to ask yourself at this point now, do you want to be a general or do you want to be a soldier? Because the choice is yours." And at that point, I knew to really honor that and step into leadership and step into a space that took me a long time to really to earn the stripes of. You don't just get qualified as a general, you have to earn the stripes with the universe, coming back to that thing. And the universe will put you in positions when it feels you're capable. And I had to get myself capable, and then the position started to come.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second just to let you know we have some amazing guests coming on this show over the next couple of weeks. We have a doctor of positive psychology who's going to share with us some really cool ideas on how to stay happy and aligned with your sense of purpose. We have the mindset coach for one of the world's top sporting teams on how to optimize our own sense of capacity. And we have a global expert on imposter syndrome. All in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned, stay subscribed. Now back to the show. I love that idea. Like you, I did a lot of work in corporates in the leadership space, and I work with a lot of senior execs, and the people who are consistently most successful, because you can be successful for a while. You can have a really great flush, you can ride the wave, and everyone's riding the wave, you just be on a slightly bigger wave. But to do it consistently over time requires a level of, do I want to be the general or the soldier, to use your metaphor? And I'm thinking specifically of a meeting I was in recently with a leader who's internationally recognized CEO, been in a few different organizations where they've led really well, etc. And the conversation about burnout comes up in the wider conversation, and a little bit controversially, but I think general-esque, like to your metaphor. He said, "I've never ever burnt out in my whole life, and I've led far bigger businesses than this, and you know that, right?" He said, "But what I do every single week, I look at my diary and I look at going, okay, I've got all this stuff going on. Where are my swims? Because if I don't have enough swims in my diary, I can't do all those meetings. And I'll take that out and I'll put in my swim. Because I've learned that's what works." And anyone who swims knows swimming is very meditative. So it's his version of meditation. But without that, I can't lead effectively. And it was a real challenge to the room. And he wasn't saying to anybody, if you feel burned out, you're not. That's not what he was saying. What he's saying is, I'm taking responsibility for myself. What are you doing?
Look, my day, the primary focus of my day is what state I'm in. Because I know the state I'm in will determine so much about the outcome of my day. So I prioritize throughout the day, and that's my morning routine, my midday routine, and then my evening before bed routine. Those things are critical for me to have peak performance throughout the day. So peak performance doesn't matter who you are or what you're doing. You don't have to be a CEO. Peak performance is literally realizing your true potential as a human. And we should all be operating from a state of peak performance. It's our right. But it requires not doing what is being done by the norm. It requires doing what is true for you.
Otherwise it wouldn't be peak.
Exactly, it wouldn't be peak, right? And so, for me, the primary focus of my day is what state I'm in throughout the day, and what do I need to do to stay in that state. So peak performance, the way I see it, is what we do when we're not performing will lead to peak performance.
Let's take two aspects to that. Let's talk your morning routine and your nighttime routine. I want to talk about those, but then I want to talk about how do you get back to performance? Because you're not a robot, you're a human being, which means you're never always at peak performance, right? No one ever is. But the Dalai Lama had a great story where he was doing a piece, and someone goes, "How do you stay focused?" And Dalai Lama said to the guys, "What distracts you when you meditate?" He said, "Hamburgers." And Dalai Lama said, "I get distracted by hamburgers as well." The difference is I catch myself being distracted and I come back quicker than you. That's the difference. Right?
Absolutely.
So he was just recognizing, I'm not a robot, I'm a human, but I'm managing myself. So I want to come back to both of those. Tell me, you said you had 7 steps routine. What's your 7 steps?
So first thing I do before anything when get out of bed, I go to the bathroom and I pull out my tongue scraper, which is a stainless steel device that you can buy on Amazon for $20.
Yeah.
And you can get copper or stainless steel. I use stainless steel because it stops rusting. And then you stick your tongue out and you scrape what's called AMA, A-M-A. It's a brownish white sticky bacteria, and the body's trying to expel toxic stuff from the body through the night, which is why we're sleeping. That's why we want to cough or go to the toilet. And so AMA is on our tongue. We always, in an ancient Ayurvedic tradition for 5,000 years, people will scrape their tongue.
I never knew that.
Yeah, it's very famous.
I do that maybe once a week, and I had no idea that was a thing.
Yeah, so once you start scraping, every day you should scrape before you drink anything and do anything. So once I scrape, then the next thing I will do, not every day, but I do this sort of 2 or 3 times a week, will be what's called oil pulling or oil swilling. And you'll get organic sesame oil or organic coconut oil, always organic, and then you're going to swill it in your mouth for 10 to 15 minutes. And that swilling is again extracting bacteria. So a lot of what we want to do for peak performance and optimizing the human state is actually what we're clearing out of the body. And that can be mental, physical, emotional. And so, which is where your saunas and sweating comes in. And so oil swilling is about pulling out a lot of toxicity. They're finding a lot of illness in the body is coming from poor hygiene in the mouth. So we're clearing a lot of bacteria. And then after 10, 15 minutes, you'll spit that out, not in the sink because it will clog up your drains. You put it in a paper towel and in the bin. So then the third step after that is to drink a large amount of liquid. So that's purified water with something in it. So I always put either some hydrolyte or some apple cider vinegar. Maybe it might be, I'm a big fan of creatine, so I have creatine every day. Magnesium's a good one, but I have that before bed. But something in your water, it could be green smoothie, green powder, just to hydrate the body, but also alkalize the body. We get very acidic, even when we're sleeping. So alkalizing the body first thing in the morning, lots of fluids to hydrate the body. And then from there, while I'm swilling, I'll do some stretching. If I'm not stretching and swilling, then I'll go to the gym and do some stretching there. But stretching every morning is really important, particularly when we're lying quite rigidly all night. And so as we get older...
Do you use a roller? Or
I do lots of things. I'll use devices, rollers, little massage balls and sorts of things. Lots of different things. My house is kind of like a health lab. Yeah, different things. But stretching is a big one that I do. And then I like to do strength training. So I'll like to do weights probably 4 or 5 times a week in the morning.
Do you have any specific weights routine? Like is that upper body, lower body?
I just change. So I'll do back and chest one day, then I'll do arms and shoulders another day, then I'll do legs another day. Okay. And then every day I'll do abs just to really work on the core.
And are you aiming to increase strength versus to maintain strength, or what's
definitely
your purpose?
Increase strength, definitely wanting to increase. So pushing the weights to the point of breaking point.
Okay.
And surprisingly, I'm stronger and fitter now as a 58-year-old than I've ever been. And that's just, I think this idea of us getting older is a psychological thing that a lot of men have to overcome.
Yeah.
And then cardio. So I do cardio every day, 20 minutes of any different things from the bike or the treadmill or the ski machine or a rower. Today was a rower.
Is it always at home, or do you go to the gym
no,
for that?
I go to the gym for that. I find psychologically just putting on some techno and being in a gym, there's something really inspiring about that. I find it hard to work out on my own at home. Yeah. Plus I'm an extrovert, so I like get energy from being around people. Yeah. So I like the environment of going to a gym. And then from there I like to journal and meditate. So it's a long process. If I haven't got time, I'll condense that down. Not every day I'll get to the gym, but I always have meditation and the oil, not the oil pulling, the tongue scraping, and then the hydration, the big 4 or 3 that start my day.
I have never heard anyone say tongue scraping as a daily routine.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's
all my students will tongue scrape every day.
That's extraordinary. So the days that you are, say, flying to do a talk or a keynote or an engagement somewhere, you can't do all of that. Which ones do you prioritize?
Definitely the hydration and tongue scraping. Okay. And then if I'm traveling, so if I'm in an Uber because I've got to go somewhere or a flight, then I'll just meditate when I get those times. You'll always find time for 15, 20 minutes to close your eyes and meditate. So that always fits into my day unconditionally, pretty much morning and afternoon, but I'll just have to adapt to wherever it's going to fit in. That's the best time. So the journaling and the oil pulling and the stretching and the gym, they'll be the ones that will have to drop away.
Okay. Yeah. A lot of people say that they do journaling right after do weights because they're using the weight session just to, ruminate on a particular question. Do you have a process that you use?
Yeah, look, I like to put put it towards the back end of my morning routine. When I've kind of cleared all the noise and the clutter and everything out. I find that the mind is much more expansive. And with journaling, we can do a couple of different things. And it could be gratitude for what is. So you're looking at your current life and being really deeply grateful. I prefer to do gratitude at the end of the day. And I did this blog with a tip that if you were to get a notebook by the side of your bed, gosh, I'm reminding myself to do this now. So many times we'll have a good strategy and then we'll drop it after a while. But if you can write 10 things every night before you close your eyes and go to sleep that you're grateful for that day, things that have happened, things that you've had in your life, fresh running water, food in your pantry, and your dog licking your face, whatever it is that happened that day, and be grateful for that and close your day out with gratitude, the next day will be phenomenally successful. It's quite amazing. So many people messaged me after that blog and said, that has been a game changer for me more than anything else in my life.
I have coached, I think it's about, I'm going to say 1,500, maybe 2,000 executives over a long period now. And the one thing I literally prescribe everybody, I give them two things, but the one thing I said, of these two, if you're not going to do one, do this one, is to do a gratitude journal at the end of the day, like you just said. And what I say to people is, even the days that you've had the absolute worst day of your life, you've been fired from work, you've lost your $1 million, your wife no longer wants to talk to you, kids think you're terrible, like the worst possible day. Are you happy to still be alive? If you are, then write that down, right?
Well, to take it even further for those listening, which has been a big shift for me as well, big shift this one, particularly when we wake up during the night with that sense of dread that things aren't working out for you. And this is what I got from David Geam. I always like to acknowledge and credit people where I get these insights from, but David Geam is a phenomenal leader in the world at the moment. A lot of his work is around the Kabbalah. But he said, if you can have gratitude for your current challenge and know that the Creator has somehow created this situation in some way, shape, or form for you in an advantageous way, that by having gratitude for this experience and the lesson that you're learning from this, the knowledge that you're acquiring through this, the things that you're gaining through this, will make a phenomenal shift down the track as a result of that.
One of my mentors said to me once, it's not the same words you've just said, but when the challenge is there and you're dreading it, just I'm looking forward for the lesson I'm about to learn. Let me look for this lesson. Unfortunately, sometimes the lesson is you, but that's
right. Totally.
Okay, so journey at the end of the day is one of your key things. You talked about the end of day routine. Journey is part of it.
So actually, just to clarify, I'd started on gratitude. The other one was visualization. So gratitude is where we are and what we've got. Visualization is where we're going and what does that look like. And I always say that the captain of the ship cannot get to the port of destination unless they know where that port is. And the navigational route will come only once you know what the destination is. So a lot of us are just sort of floundering in life and hoping things work out. But if we get very clear about where we're going, what we're doing, what it looks like, and who are you when you get there, what does it feel like for you to be actually in that location from this current version of yourself in the future version of yourself, then what we find is that the manifestation of that over time will play out. And I've seen it happen so many times in my life where things that I was visualizing, intending, mapping out actually came to fruition. It was quite phenomenal.
Do you visualize from the perspective of exact details relative to the essence of what I want to come out? Because they might be the same thing, but they might not be the same thing.
I'll get you into the granular of how detailed I get. There was one situation where I'd never spoken on stage in front of anyone as a broker. But when I left being a broker to become a meditation teacher, I wanted to really impact the world with my vision of inspiring 1 billion people to meditate daily. So I knew I had to learn how to speak in front of people. I visualized standing, this is when we had the entertainment centre, which is now the ICC in Sydney. The entertainment centre used to hold 10,000 people. It was the biggest auditorium in Australia. I used to visualize walking on stage at the entertainment centre. I visualized walking through the purple drapes, bright lights in my eyes, one microphone stand on a massive stage, 10,000 people in the auditorium, listening, being moved, inspired, even laughing if I cracked a funny joke, and really get into the tangible, measurable, vibrational resonance of me being there in that situation. Now, fast forward many years, I got invited only 6 months ago to speak on stage at the ICC, which is where the entertainment centre used to be. I opened up an event for Wanderlust with Jane Fonda, and I had 5,000 people had bought tickets to that event. Now, that was on the Sunday night. Now, interestingly, there was the same event they ran in Melbourne at the plenary for 5,000 people, and I opened that one as well. So there was over the space of 4 days, there was 10,000 people, and one of the venues was where the entertainment centre used to be. And I've seen so many of those situations, being on national TV, doing a book signing in New York. I visualized all of those. The book signing in New York, I went to Google Street View. I Googled a bookstore on Broadway, New York. I only chose Broadway because it's one of the only streets I knew in New York. There must be a bookstore in Broadway. I want to have a book published. I'd never even written a book. I Googled bookstores, New York, Broadway. There was one called Strand Bookstore. And I went to Google Street View and I looked at the street vision of that bookstore, and I visualized me being in that bookstore signing my book that I'd never written, and people queuing up out the street, out the door and down the street holding my book, waiting for me to sign it. Years forward, we did a screening of my film across the US, 20 cities. We went from LA, worked all the way across to get to New York and finish there. And I was there in East Village in New York, and at the end of each screening of our film, we would have people buying our books and wanting me to sign, as the producer of the film, the copy of the book, which I co-wrote with Jackie. And there I was, I looked down the line, sitting at the desk signing copies of the book. I'm in New York, signing, and there was 40 people in the queue. And look, it wasn't Strand Bookstore, it wasn't Broadway, but it was pretty darn close. Yeah. So it's amazing how
do you think that works? Like from a metaphysics perspective,
or I have no
I know this might be a whole new tangent.
If anyone can answer that question, please let me know. But Joe Dispenza's doing.
Because there would be some people who listen to you going, "I just don't believe that," and that kind of crap. And Joe Dispenza, as you call it, and Anthony Robbins, a whole lot of people go, no, this is how you do life.
There's a science.
And there's the whole thing, The Secret, which goes, you know, Rhonda, what's her name, who did The Secret, goes, yeah, this is how you do it. And there's massive arguments about that's just rubbish versus actually this is really, really works. What's your perspective?
I think as humans, what we currently know is only what we've learned. And what we don't know is what we will learn. And that is the unknown at this point. So science can only validate what we've currently learned. Okay, so we can scientifically say how Google Maps works. Okay, now 50 years ago they couldn't scientifically say how something like Google Maps could work. No one 50 years ago, let's say 100 years ago, could scientifically have said how the internet would work, right? That I could be in Antarctica with Starlink and start watching the World Cup soccer. Like no one could have possibly understood the science behind that. But that didn't mean it wasn't possible. So where we're at now is only what we know, and what we will know is what's in the future. And I think that's something that we're starting to grasp. There's something in the subtler field of life beyond the denseness, which is what AI is and what crypto is and all the other things. There's a subtler field. The internet around this room is all the information in the internet. We can't see it, we can't touch it. But if I open up my phone as a receptor, it can tune into it and pick it up because the information's here. Yeah. So we know that there's a subtle field. We know that there's an intelligence. We know that this stuff is here, but we're just starting to learn how to play with it. And the law of attraction is a phenomenon. I don't understand the full science behind it. I think someone like Joe Dispenza might be able to explain a little bit better than me, but we're definitely starting to notice that our vibrational resonance is like a Wi-Fi modem that sends signals out into the field that then tunes in somehow to reciprocate and send things in congruency, in alignment with that vibrational resonance. I'm not sure exactly how that works though.
But your experience is that it does.
I experience it every day. Yeah, it's phenomenal. Yeah, it's incredible. And look, even what we're starting to see in the world, phenomenons are quite remarkable. They're teaching this in Sydney, but it's big in India. At these what's called gurukuls. And they're teaching children at school how to read with their eyes completely blindfolded. I've seen it personally myself. I know friends of mine that can do it. I actually filmed someone doing it clearly with the first version of our film. Not only are they learning how to read completely blindfolded, that's called conscious reading. They're able to move objects now. They're able to do all sorts of phenomenal things. So it's early days as to what the human can do, and I think the next sort of 50 to 100 years is going to be quite remarkable what we can do with
So for the cynical people amongst us, this is Wolverine and Friends being normal.
That's right.
All of those innate skills are actually normal.
Yeah, it could be bewildering for sure, and I get this, understand skepticism. But yeah, it's I think what we're going to be able to discover as humans is quite amazing. What's ahead.
Maybe come back. I said we'd come back full circle, so let's bring back full circle. One of the reasons why I wanted to bring you onto the show was your story is one that I think many people would love to hear, and it's a signpost for a lot of us who are going, I'm not happy where I am, I don't know where to go, and you've done that really, really well, and you're leading a very, very different life to the one you led, and you seem quite happy and content in this new version, which is really cool.
I still have struggles.
You're human, right? So I've said you're not a robot, but you find yourself, you know what good looks like for you, and you do that, and you're living the life of the general, not the life of the soldier. But for the listener who's listening, going, where do I start? I don't think I want to go full Zen, and I don't think I want to write a book and sell it in Broadway. Where do I start?
Yeah, I think there's two things. One is, where do I start as far as claiming back my life and finding health and happiness within inside myself, and then the other one is, where do I start as if I'm going to become a leader in the world? So do we start with the first?
Let's start the first one.
Yeah. I think it's just micro steps. There was a great leader of the English cycling team, Sir David Braithwaite, I think his name is. Is that his name?
1%ers.
Yeah. And the micro habits, micro changes in our life. We don't want to have massive dramatic upheavals in our life. It's just about making really small changes, like turn your phone off at 9:30 at night and prepare for bed for the next 30 minutes and turn your light out at 10 o'clock. In the morning, drink half a litre of water and maybe do some stretching. If it's something you want to get into meditation, find a teacher. We can give you a little simple meditation if people want to have a little exercise now. It's very, very simple. You simply just close your eyes, and just sitting in a chair with your eyes closed, you're going to focus on the breath moving in and out of your nostrils. And as you have this natural breath, not a forced breath, it's just your body's natural breath, nothing forced, nothing controlled. You just bring your awareness to the cool skin around the rim of the nostril. And this is where the air, as it moves in and out of your nostrils, it's going to brush moisture. There's a little thin film of moisture inside the nostril, on the skin. And as the air brushes the moisture on the skin, it cools the skin ever so slightly. And we're just going to keep our attention on that cool skin inside the nostril. And whenever the mind drifts away, as it will do, we're just going to keep coming back to that centerpiece. And by just simply focusing on that one point, letting go of the need to think of anything else, not craving dopamine from anything else, just coming back to here, we start regulating our nervous system, quietening the body, quietening the mind, reducing fluctuations, reducing stimulation, and we start to very simply, very quickly, within 5 minutes, put the body into the parasympathetic nervous system, and the body now starts to rest and repair, and all your cortisol and adrenaline starts to drop down, and your body starts to regulate itself. And that alone you could do for 5 or 10 minutes is plenty for you to rebalance yourself during the day.
Thank you for doing that. It's the first time in this show we've done that.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, beautiful.
I find it extraordinary simple. Not profound, because it's so simple, that just focusing on breath in and skin on your nose, that's enough.
Yeah. You're just trying to find a center point, because what we want to do is we want to stop the mind from this oscillation.
Yeah.
And this oscillation is happening 50, 60,000 times a day, and it's exhausting for the nervous system. It's exhausting for the biochemistry in the body. It's exhausting for the brain, exhausting for the body. That's why we're ridiculously exhausted, because of the amount of mental activity. So we use a mantra in Vedic meditation, as you know, and the mantra is the same process. It's just a lot easier repeating the mantra, because the mind finds that quite enticing. But that one there is more of a Buddhist practice, more of a concentration, focused meditation. Again, that's a simple practice that costs you nothing. You can just do that anytime.
You have a goal of 1 billion people to do this. That's a big number. Well, first of all, explain to listeners what is the goal and what's driving that for you.
Yeah, so I started the Stillness Project, and the Stillness Project had a vision to inspire 1 billion people to meditate daily. And one thing I knew definitively through my own personal experience, but also the hundreds and thousands of people that I've taught this to, is that we see definitively people don't become perfect, but they become better. They become better. and they become better. This morning I was walking back from the gym, and I thought one guy was going one direction, but he pivoted, and I sort of walked in front of him, and he turned to me and says, I won't even swear, but he said some very mean, nasty things. Don't effing walk in front of me like that again, you F, you see you something NT. And I was like, wow, he's so dysregulated, that he's so triggered and upset that someone would simply, unfortunately, walk in front of him instead of around him. And that then triggers a response from him to fire some forceful and unpleasant energy using words in a direction of another person. And we do this with bombs in other countries, but this one was using words. And luckily for me, I just felt compassion for him, because I thought, wow, he's had a really tough day, and most likely for the rest of his day could be pretty brutal. No one feels good when you respond with things that way. But if he was a meditator, he would have had compassion and kindness and been okay with it. And so we just become better, and we become calmer, we become more compassionate, more empathetic. Again, not perfect. I still have a lot of stuff to work on, and that doesn't really end. It's just that you just have greater clarity, greater ability to be non-reactive and proactive, sovereign in your state. There's a beautiful word called tatiksha. Tatiksha means to be unruffled by the circumstances of life. So that guy was very ruffled, whereas in tatiksha, I'm unruffled. I wasn't disturbed in any way, shape or form by his response. And so we want to claim tatiksha, and particularly as leaders of the world. At the moment, unfortunately, we don't have any politicians in the world that meditate. Maybe the King of Bhutan. And I actually ran a retreat the other day with the future Prime Minister of Bhutan, and he was meditating, and he's a beautiful man. And, there's some really phenomenal things happening in a couple of countries, but not many countries. We still got leaders that are acting emotionally. And that's not a healthy way for leaders to be acting.
A friend of mine, you may well know them, giving you background, they ran a program with some execs and CEOs, and part of it was learning to meditate, and every part of the program over a year-long piece, the meditation was built into it. And it might have been as simple as the one you just did with me, or it might have been a longer one. But the group CEO of the organization, at the end of the program, when they were asked, so what did you get from this year-long thing? His answer was 2 seconds. So what do you mean? He said, I got 2 seconds. The pause from my reaction, 2 second pause to my from my trigger, 2 second pause to my reaction. And my friends initially were really disappointed. Oh, we've done all this, we did this. He goes, no, you've missed the whole point. I've learned the value of 2 seconds. I've learned the value of just manage myself before I choose my reaction. He said, you have no idea how invaluable that has been.
I love that. That's a good name for a book, I think.
2 seconds.
Get your 2 seconds. Yeah. That's cool.
So for our listeners, you've already told us, start simply, just start with micro, get started. What's your hope for the folks listening to this?
The hope is that people live more healthily. They know there are simple strategies and steps to be healthy. And you're not going to see them on a billboard. You're going to see Coca-Cola on a billboard. You're going to see McDonald's on a billboard. You're going to see Krispy Kremes on a billboard. You're not going to see the steps for you to not be part of the system and claim sovereignty in your health. It's not that complex to be healthy. The second thing is to be emotionally and mentally stable, for people to find that regardless of the challenges of life, because they will come thick and fast every time, every day, there will always be challenges. But how do I emotionally and mentally find my way through that complexity of life in a way that isn't emotionally upheaval and reactive? Because that's going to lead to the health as well. And so those are the two main things. How do I be physically, mentally, emotionally more stable, more sovereign, reclaim back from the influences of the world around me? And I think fourthly, on top of that, those three is getting a bit woo-woo again, just as a little bit of a warning here, that we have also another layer of reality, another layer of existence, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. We have to start realizing that there is something beyond our physical, mental, and emotional state that we have accessible to us. And you can call it being or presence, or in Sanskrit I like to call it sakshikutashta, the sana witness, which is consciousness itself. So I have thoughts, I have feelings, I have a physicality, but there's consciousness itself, which is as Einstein would call it, a unified field of intelligence. and we need to know how to access that field and realize that we're not just these 3 layers of denseness, with something more than that.
I think we need to bring you back so we could talk about that topic. And in the land of AI, what does all that mean?
Absolutely.
And GI and AGI and all that, because I think that's a phenomenally interesting topic. I could talk to you for hours about many, many things, and we don't have hours for this episode. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you think is really relevant or important for this conversation?
I think knowing that our audience, imagine, are predominantly men, and in a particular age bracket where we're getting to that, what's next? What am I here for? What's this all about? And I see that life has 3 acts. Act 1 is 0 to 30 these days. It used to be 0 to 20, but we've pushed that act out to 30. And Act 1 is a very narcissistic, egocentric time, which is really just all about you. From the dummy, the boob, the toy, the rattle, all the way through to your 30s. What can I get for me? The second act is a tough one, predominantly for men, because, and I shouldn't say that, because it's tough for women as well. Actually, it's equally tough for men and women. Just want to make sure I correct that. The second act is all about contribution, responsibility, career, family, mortgages, debt. You know, it's
achieving, striving.
It's burdened with obligation to others. You know, and usually it involves a lot of people. Particularly, this is why men 6 to 1 have greater levels of suicide than women, because they feel this immense sense of responsibility and they're just trying to escape from that responsibility. It's a tough act for the second act. But the third act, a lot of that stuff is passed now. The kids are moving out of home. It usually starts around 50. It's pushing a little bit later now because we're having children later. My kids are still at home and I'm 58, so they're 24. We had them a bit later than when most people in the old days were having them in their 20s, and also they're staying at home longer. But that third act is when you really start thinking about, wow, I'm looking at retirement. What am I going to do with my days? What is my point of life? And we can get very lost. We can get very disenchanted. We can get very depressed. A lot of guys get very depressed at this point. And what's really important, I believe, particularly for the masculine, because women can have masculine energy as well, but for the masculine, it needs to be goal-oriented. It needs to know what it's here for, what it's doing, and you need to wake up with purpose. You need to wake up with a mission. You need to wake up with something bigger than you that is going to be your why. Simon Sinek's great talk, what is your why? Why are you getting out of bed each day? And if it's saving, lost dogs on the street or working in an orphanage, have a why. And that's what's really important for the third act.
You are in your third act, albeit the early stage of the third act.
That's right.
What is the, if you could imagine the 75-year-old version of you reaching back to talk to you now in the third act, what would that person be asking of you, or telling you or asking of you?
It's such a good question. If I was 75 looking back at me, I made some really dumb financial decisions. So I was firstly, it would say, just think before you leave. Firstly.
I don't think you're the only person in the world who's done that.
Oh my goodness. I think the big one is to trust the process. Don't put so much pressure on yourself. Trust the process. Know that it's going to be okay. And more importantly, and this speaks to everyone, I think, who particularly guys getting into their 50s and 60s, is don't stop having fun. Do fun stuff that just lights you up and doesn't make sense and is gleeful. And I'll give you an example. This was not in my third act, it was in my second act, but I was going to yoga one morning, and particularly some of us in the spiritual community will be a bit serious about spirituality sometimes, like just have a T-bone steak or something, But I was going to yoga, it was 5 a.m. This is when the Cross in Sydney hadn't closed itself down and the Cross was pumping. And yoga was in Edgecliff, and I was driving along New Southend Road going to the yoga studio, and it was a cold, rainy Sunday morning, and I was about to turn left to go to my yoga studio, which was in White City Tennis Courts, and I thought, I have no idea why I did this. I drove up and I thought, I wonder what the Cross is doing. And I used to love the clubs and the rave scene, which I'd left behind at that point. But I drove up to King's Cross, and remember the Goldfish Bowl? And
I do.
And the Goldfish Bowl had this thumping dance music coming out of it. There was a crowd of people out the front, and I was in my yoga gear. Luckily, I had trainers on. I parked my car.
Go in.
I walked past the doorman and I danced for 2 hours straight. and it was the best music I've ever heard. I walked home, the kids and the wife are just waking up. I said, I've just been in a club for 2 hours and it's the craziest fun. But that was so good for my soul.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes we've got to do some random stuff that just like doesn't make sense, but it's good.
Have you been back?
They closed it down, which is a tragedy in Sydney itself. It's just like, but every now and then, interestingly, I do like to get up because I wake up quite early on the weekends, and every now and then I'd drive around the streets of Sydney and just see what the nightlife is doing at 5 or 6 in the morning. I find it quite fascinating. I do get a bit of FOMO sometimes.
My 20-year-old son, who you've met, we were driving up Oxford Street recently, and he just said to me, I was over in that nightclub recently. I said, that's where I used to go. And I was older than you. He goes, seriously? I said, yeah, I remember coming out of that place many, many times. Me and your mom. It's good to do that. Yeah. Tom, it's been a pleasure having you. It's been a lot of fun. I appreciate your insights and your wisdom, and I look forward to having you back.
Absolutely, I'd love to be back.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that episode and you got some value from it. New listeners keep telling me that they found our show because someone like you shared an episode with them. So if you think this was helpful for you, can I ask you just to think about 1 or 2 of your friends or someone in your family that might enjoy it and share it with them. If you haven't been onto our website, don'tlettheoldmanin.com, please go there because there's some free resources that might be useful for you, and you can subscribe to our weekly newsletter so you never miss out on what's coming next. And lastly, if you haven't subscribed, one more time, can I ask you, press the button to subscribe on whatever video or audio platform you're on. Until next time, don't let the old man in.